Imagine Marcus Aurelius, the most influential emperor of his era, waking each morning aware of the chaos and adversity that lay ahead. What was his approach? He didn't complain or dwell on his troubles. Instead, he quietly prepared his mind, understanding, as the Stoics did, that our only true possessions are our judgment and our perspective on what unfolds. Now consider yourself. How often have you recounted the same tales of sorrow, scarcity, or frustration? How much energy have you expended rehashing your limitations, as if your words were invisible chains binding you to a life you no longer desire? This video isn't for those seeking excuses, but for individuals ready to break free from their self-imposed narratives. You won't find comfort here in maintaining the status quo. Instead, you'll encounter the Stoic challenge. Cease discussing what weakens you and begin narrating the life you aspire to create. Every word you utter serves as a direct command to your mind, and if you don't take charge of your discourse, you'll find yourself enslaved by your own stories. The Stoics taught that genuine freedom begins when you choose what merits being voiced and what deserves to remain unsaid. Today I'll reveal how silence can be your most powerful ally, how to safeguard your journey, how to let your achievements speak for themselves, and how to reconstruct your personal narrative with the strength of someone who no longer seeks external validation. There's no room for complacency here. If you desire respect, start by respecting your own story. Stay until the end, because every piece of advice in this video could be the difference between remaining a spectator in your life and becoming the protagonist the Stoics would commend. If you're ready to stop replaying what happens to you and start building what you deserve, this is your moment. And if this message resonates with you, give it a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because our purpose here isn't to fill the silence with empty words, it's to transform your life through action and awareness. Are you prepared to speak only to progress? Then join me and don't miss a single second of what's to come. The influence of your narrative. The impact of your narrative is among the most overlooked strengths you possess, a truth the ancient Stoics deeply understood. Envision a sailor navigating a tempestuous sea. They cannot command the weather, but they can expertly steer their vessel. Your words, both your internal monologue and external expressions, function in a similar way. Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca didn't write to merely embellish philosophy. They wrote to constantly remind themselves that our thoughts and words are the genesis of our experiences. If you repeatedly tell yourself that you are weak, that life is unfair, or that everything goes wrong, you not only believe it, but you manifest it. A Stoic acknowledges pain and difficulty, but never permits them to dominate their discourse. They understand that every word is a direct command to their mind and, consequently, to their destiny. At the core of Stoicism lies the principle that we cannot control external events, but we can control our responses to them. This is where your narrative gains its true power. When you vocalize your deficiencies, wounds, and failures, you empower them, granting them a prominent place in your identity. The Stoic observes this impulse and challenges it. Instead of reiterating a story of suffering, they choose to articulate a narrative of learning, resilience, and action. It's not about pretending everything is fine, but about ceasing to cultivate the weeds in your mind. Altering your narrative means changing the lens through which you perceive life, which in turn transforms your energy, your decisions, and ultimately, your reality. The Stoic discourse is concise, objective, and above all, truthful. There is no room for empty complaints or dramatic exaggerations. Speaking like a Stoic means speaking from a place of truth and purpose. This doesn't imply suppressing your feelings, but rather choosing how you express them. If an emotion overwhelms you, silence can be wiser than any words. If you decide to speak, let it be to construct, to inspire, to move forward. The Stoic knows that their words are their calling card, and that every conversation is an opportunity to practice virtue, temperance, and compassion, both towards themselves and others. Discipline in speech mirrors internal discipline. The Stoic trains their mind not to be swept away by the urge to complain, criticize, or self-pity. They understand that what emanates from their mouth is a reflection of what transpires within. Therefore, before speaking, they pause, observe, and choose. This pause, this brief interval between stimulus and response, is where true freedom resides. It is not about remaining silent out of fear, but about speaking only when your words possess more value than your silence. Thus, discourse becomes a tool of self-governance and self-respect rather than an uncontrolled emotional outburst. When you decide to shift your narrative, you begin to see positive outcomes in all aspects of your life. Your environment reacts differently, your relationships transform, your energy elevates. You are no longer the protagonist of an endless drama, but the architect of a new story. Stoicism is not merely a philosophy to be read, it is a way of life practiced in every word, every narrative, every chosen silence. Change your narrative, change your life. It is that simple and that profound. How you shape others' treatment of you. In daily life, many individuals unconsciously demonstrate how they wish to be treated with every word they utter. Stoicism unequivocally states that you are accountable not only for what you feel, but also for how you communicate it. If someone constantly expresses themselves from a place of insecurity, complaint, or self-criticism, they are invariably conveying a message to those around them. This repeated narrative becomes a sort of instruction manual for others, who almost without realizing it, learn to perceive and treat them as weak, insecure, or incapable of facing challenges. The Stoic, conversely, understands that their discourse is a tool of influence and carefully selects how they express themselves even during the most difficult moments. The manner in which one discusses themselves and their circumstances serves as a declaration of intent. If lament, self-limitation, or victimization dominate every conversation, this not only reinforces that image in one's own mind, but also invites others to accept it as an absolute truth. Stoicism teaches that while vulnerability is an inherent part of life, sharing it with awareness rather than from uncontrolled emotional overflow makes all the difference. Speaking with clarity, respect, and firmness, even when fatigued or annoyed, demonstrates self-control and temperance, two virtues paramount for the Stoic sage. In this way, others learn that such a person is not swept away by chaos, but responds with calm and coherence. Tone, gaze, silences, and the way one responds in tense situations convey far more than words alone. The Stoic knows they don't need to shout to command respect or impose their viewpoint to be heard. Their presence, their manner of expression, and their ability to maintain composure amidst the storm naturally inspire reverence. When someone expresses themselves with confidence, respect, and clarity, others adjust their treatment accordingly. This is not about manipulation, but about establishing a standard for how one expects to be treated, a standard built day by day, conversation by conversation. The power of Stoic discourse lies in the consistency between what is said and what is done. It is not enough to demand respect or understanding. One must first demonstrate it in how they communicate with themselves and with others. The Stoic sage considers their words before uttering them, choosing the appropriate moment and the correct intention. Thus, their relationships transform, not because others miraculously change, but because they themselves have elevated the quality of their communication and consequently the quality of their connections. Respect and trust are not begged. They are inspired through consistency and temperance. When an individual communicates with awareness, they choose to be an agent of transformation in their surroundings. Their words do not pollute, but rather cleanse the atmosphere. Their discourse is not a reflection of open wounds, but of healed scars and integrated lessons. The Stoic understands that every word can be a seed of respect or a barrier of distrust. Therefore, they speak as one who knows they are teaching others, not just with what they say, but with how they say it. Slowly, the environment learns to treat them with the dignity and respect they afford themselves. Guard your growth journey. In the pursuit of personal growth, a common pitfall is the urge to broadcast every small step to the world. Stoicism teaches that true transformation is a deeply personal, almost sacred journey that requires protection from external opinions and judgment. When an individual is undergoing a profound change, their emerging self is still fragile, like a nascent plant requiring shelter before facing harsh winds and intense sunlight. The Stoics understood that inner strength is cultivated in silence, away from the prying or critical eyes of others, because every opinion can be an impediment, diverting or weakening one's commitment to themselves. The impulse to tell everyone about new habits, plans, or goals might seem motivating, but often it's merely a search for external validation. The Stoic recognizes this desire and observes it without succumbing. They know that others' approval is fleeting, and that genuine change only solidifies when it springs from deep conviction, not from applause or external attention. Therefore, they choose to progress quietly, working on their transformation with discipline and patience, without the need to announce every move. In this way, their energy focuses on the process, not on the image they project. In silence, the process of change gathers strength. There are no distractions, no comparisons, only an honest dialogue with oneself. The Stoic uses this time to reflect, adjust, and correct course without the pressure of having to demonstrate immediate results. Each day presents an opportunity to grow from the roots, to solidify the new habit or mindset before exposing it to the world. When change is authentic, it doesn't need to be declared. It becomes evident in one's actions, in the serenity of their demeanor, in the consistency of their decisions. Protecting your growth journey doesn't mean isolating yourself or distrusting everyone, but rather wisely choosing who is allowed into that transformative space. The Stoic shares their progress only with those who can genuinely contribute, support, or inspire, not with those who criticize or sow doubt. They understand that the energy of others' words can influence their path, for better or worse. Therefore, they carefully manage their environment, select their conversations, and prioritize quality over quantity in their relationships as they grow. Ultimately, a quietly protected growth journey blossoms into inner strength. When the transformation is mature, the results speak for themselves, requiring no explanations or justifications. The Stoic can then share their story, not to seek approval, but to inspire others from genuine experience and authenticity. Thus, change ceases to be a promise and becomes a solid reality, built from conviction and temperance. Let your achievements speak. In a world where everyone seems to compete for attention, where social media is saturated with promises, announcements, and grand declarations, the true Stoic chooses the less traveled path, that of silence and action. Ancient sages understood that discussing what you will do is far easier than actually doing it. The immediate gratification of outlining your plans, of receiving premature praise, is a subtle trap. The brain relaxes, feeling as though progress has already been made merely by announcing it. Yet in reality, nothing has changed until the action materializes. Stoicism teaches that virtue lies in doing, not in saying. Therefore, Stoics preferred to work in silence, not seeking approval or applause, knowing that authentic results require no explanation. The Stoic philosophy encourages cultivating humility and patience, two virtues that are tested when you decide to let your accomplishments speak for themselves. This isn't about concealing your progress out of fear or insecurity, but about preserving the energy and focus needed to build something real and lasting. When you speak too soon about your goals, you risk losing momentum, because external validation can become an early reward that weakens your commitment. The Stoic understands that strength accumulates in silence, in daily consistency, in those moments when no one is watching but you continue to advance. It is there that character is forged, where discipline becomes habit, and progress manifests as a presence that requires no words. Allowing results to speak is also an act of self-respect and respect for others. Genuine respect is not demanded, it is earned, and it is earned through consistency, through actions, through a determination that does not depend on external recognition. When your actions begin to reflect your commitment, people notice without you having to explain it. Your environment responds differently, your relationships become stronger, and your reputation grows naturally. The Stoic understands that true influence comes not from promises, but from example. Therefore, each day they rise with the intention of building, not of impressing. The Stoic strategic silence is not passivity, it is a declaration of power. It is the conscious decision not to squander energy on empty speeches, not to fall into the temptation of seeking validation prematurely. It is trusting that work well done, sooner or later, will become evident. Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus repeatedly emphasize that the only thing we truly control are our actions. The outcome may not arrive immediately, but the inner peace of knowing you gave your best is a reward no one can take from you. Thus, the Stoic learns to find satisfaction in the process, in every small step forward, without the need to announce it to the world. Ultimately, letting your achievements speak for themselves is one of the purest forms of freedom. You don't depend on others' opinions. You don't exhaust yourself justifying your decisions or competing for attention. You simply move forward, build, and allow time and evidence to be your greatest allies. Stoicism reminds you that true success is quiet, that greatness does not need to shout, and that the deepest satisfaction comes from progressing, even if no one sees it. Reclaim your narrative. Throughout life, many people find themselves ensnared in stories born from pain, failure, or frustration. Unconsciously, they transform these narratives into a sort of invisible cage, repeating phrases like, "I always fail," "Things never work out for me," or "That's just how I am." Stoicism teaches that genuine freedom begins when one dares to question this narrative and decides to change it from its roots. It's not about denying what occurred or pretending the past didn't exist, but about ceasing to drag it along as a life sentence. The power to reclaim your narrative lies in recognizing that you are not your mistakes or your wounds, but rather what you choose to build from them. The first step to transforming your narrative is to carefully observe how you speak about yourself. Every word you use to describe yourself, every explanation you offer about your life, is a declaration of identity. If you repeat that you are impatient, clumsy, or incapable, your mind adapts to that mold and you act accordingly. But if you begin to say that you are learning to be calmer, that you are growing, that you are finding your way, you open a door to a much more powerful version of yourself. Stoicism insists that it is not the facts that determine your experience, but the interpretation you choose to give them. Changing the interpretation changes the emotion, and changing the emotion transforms your energy and your actions. Reclaiming your narrative does not mean ignoring difficult moments, but rather giving them new meaning. You can discuss your setbacks as opportunities for learning instead of proof of incapacity. You can view your errors as part of the growth process, not as definitive condemnations. The Stoic understands that every experience, even the most painful, can become a tool for progress if narrated with the intention of advancing. By doing so, you cease to be a prisoner of old labels and grant yourself permission to reinvent yourself as many times as necessary. The key lies in the conscious repetition of a new internal dialogue. Each time you catch yourself saying, "I can't," change it to, "I haven't mastered it yet, but I'm trying." If you discover yourself trapped in thoughts of defeat, replace them with phrases that propel you forward. This exercise, though it may feel forced at first, is a way to train your mind to see possibilities where before it only saw limitations. Stoicism teaches that the mind is like a garden. If you only water the weeds, that is what will grow. But if you choose to sow and tend to new seeds, in time your reality will also flourish differently. You are not condemned to live the same story forever. You hold the pen in your hand and can decide each day how you wish to narrate yourself. Speak of yourself as someone who is already growing, as someone who knows that the past does not define the future unless you allow it to. Make every word another step towards the life you truly deserve. Do not settle for the old narrative just because it is familiar. Dare to write a new one with courage, with vision, and with self-love. In this way, your story will cease to be a repetition of pain and will become a declaration of power and transformation. Internal discipline reflected in your speech. A person's true strength is not measured by what they say when everything is calm, but by how they choose their words when an inner storm rages. In Stoicism, this internal discipline forms the bedrock of a virtuous and balanced life. The Stoics taught that self-mastery begins with controlling what issues from your mouth. This isn't about suppressing emotions or feigning serenity, but about governing impulses, consciously deciding when to speak and when to remain silent. One who cannot control their tongue will struggle to control their emotions, and one who cannot control their emotions ultimately becomes a slave to their own impulses, reacting to the world rather than responding with wisdom. Speech is the most direct reflection of one's inner state. When the mind is in chaos, words often manifest as criticism, complaints, or impulsive outbursts. But the Stoic trains in that sacred pause between stimulus and response. They breathe, observe, decide. This small interval is where freedom resides, where one chooses not to react immediately, but to respond from virtue and temperance. Not every thought needs to be voiced, nor does every emotion require immediate expression. Mastering speech is a form of self-respect, as it safeguards one's environment, protects relationships and prevents unnecessary regrets. Speaking with composure, even amidst tension, demonstrates emotional mastery. The Stoic knows that words can open doors or close them forever, that a thoughtless phrase can destroy what took years to build. Therefore, discipline in speech is not a limitation, but a form of liberation. It is acting from awareness, not from chaos. It is choosing words that build, not destroy. When language becomes an instrument of self-governance, life becomes more stable and relationships healthier. This discipline is not practiced during easy times, but during difficult ones, when exhaustion, anger, or frustration threaten to take control. Precisely then, when everything inside wants to explode, the Stoic breathes and waits, not to impress others, but to be at peace with themselves, to feel pride afterward rather than regret. Thus, words become sacred, a reflection of the person one is becoming, not of the pain still being healed. Speaking with clarity, firmness, and respect transforms others' perception of you, but above all, it transforms the relationship you have with yourself. Stoicism encapsulates this with a simple truth: whoever masters their tongue masters their spirit. Discipline in speech is an act of self-love, a declaration of inner power. It is not silence born of fear, but silence born of wisdom. It is speaking only when words hold more value than silence. In this way, every conversation becomes an opportunity to practice virtue, to demonstrate temperance, to lead one's life from awareness rather than impulse. And when this becomes a habit, internal energy shifts, peace strengthens, and life aligns with one's best self. Silence as a sanctuary. In modern life, noise often seems to be the norm. Constant conversations, notifications, news, and worries clamor in the mind, leaving no room to breathe. However, the Stoics already understood that silence is far more than merely the absence of sound. It is a sanctuary, a potent tool, and a direct path to inner peace. When everything externally appears chaotic, silence becomes that safe haven where one can retreat to oneself, find clarity, and regain control over their emotions and thoughts. Silence, in the Stoic view, is neither passivity nor resignation. It is a conscious pause, a mental retreat that allows one to filter external clamor and listen to what truly matters. In these moments of stillness, the mind can observe its own thoughts without distraction, comprehend its emotions, and distance itself from impulses. It is in silence that the Stoic finds the necessary space to decide how to act, rather than reacting out of habit or external pressure. The clarity that emerges from calm is what enables wiser decisions aligned with one's values. Practicing silence is also an act of self-care. Amidst the overload of stimuli, both body and mind need to rest, to lower the external volume and allow energy to replenish. Silence helps reduce stress, anxiety, and irritability, and strengthens physical and mental health. Modern science supports what the Stoics intuitively grasped. A few minutes of daily silence can reset the brain, improve sleep quality, bolster the immune system, and allow the mind to process and organize accumulated information. Thus, silence becomes an indispensable ally for living with greater awareness and less exhaustion. For the Stoics, silence was also a form of self-governance. Choosing when to be silent and when to speak demonstrates maturity and self-control. Not everything warrants a response. Not every provocation requires a retort. Strategic silence conserves energy, prevents unnecessary conflicts, and shows that one is not a slave to their emotions or others' expectations. One who knows when to be silent at the right moment displays an inner strength that commands respect and makes a difference in any situation. Well-utilized silence can be more powerful than 1,000 words because it communicates control, presence, and wisdom. Ultimately, silence is the space where genuine transformation is cultivated. In solitude and stillness, one can look inward, acknowledge their virtues and weaknesses, and work on them without distraction. Silence allows connection with one's essence, with one's desires and fears, and from there to initiate a process of authentic growth. The Stoics found in silence the opportunity to reconcile with the past, forgive resentments, and strengthen self-confidence. Thus, silence ceases to be an uncomfortable void and becomes fertile ground for introspection, healing, and personal evolution. Conceal your fears from the world. Fear is an emotion as old as humanity itself. The Stoics neither denied nor disparaged it, recognizing that fear serves a purpose, to protect us, to keep us alert to genuine dangers. Yet, they also understood that when fear takes hold of the mind, it can become an invisible prison, limiting actions, dreams, and relationships. In today's world, where everything seems to demand sharing, where social media and daily conversations invite the exposure of even the most intimate details, Stoicism proposes a radically different path, remaining silent about one's fears until they have been confronted and understood in solitude. The Stoics comprehended that vulnerability is not weakness, but courage. However, true bravery doesn't lie in exposing open wounds to just anyone, but in knowing when, how, and with whom to share them. Displaying fears without having processed them can be perilous, as it incorporates them into one's identity and amplifies them. Furthermore, indiscriminate openness can leave a person susceptible to judgment, misunderstanding, or even ridicule from those unprepared to bear that truth. The Stoic wisely chooses their spaces and confidants, reserving their internal battles for the fertile silence of personal reflection or for dialogue with someone who genuinely knows how to listen without judgment. Stoic philosophy teaches that fear, like any emotion, is beyond our control in its emergence, but within our control in how we manage it. The first step is to observe fear without identifying with it, to understand its origin and the message it carries. Only after this internal process, when the emotion no longer dominates, is it possible to share it from a place of healing, not raw pain. Discussing fears once they have been confronted transforms the narrative. It ceases to be a cry for help and becomes a testament to overcoming, a tool for inspiring others. Confronting fears in silence strengthens character and autonomy. The Stoic knows they don't need external validation to heal, that true victories are achieved in the intimacy of one's own inner dialogue. Personal work with fear is a daily practice of courage and honesty, journaling, meditating, reflecting on the nature of fear, and seeking the lessons it conceals. In this way, fear ceases to be a monster that paralyzes and transforms into a teacher that propels growth. When the time comes to speak, the Stoic does so with intention and purpose. They do not seek compassion or approval, but rather share an integrated experience capable of adding value to those who listen. The preceding silence is what lends weight to the words, transforming vulnerability into strength and personal history into a source of wisdom. Keeping one's fears to oneself while processing them is not cowardice. It is a demonstration of self-governance, respect for one's own process, and commitment to internal evolution. The allure of instant gratification. Discussing your goals and dreams can feel so good that, for a fleeting moment, your brain is convinced you've already made progress. The mere act of sharing your intentions with others delivers a small dose of satisfaction, an immediate reward that tricks your mind into feeling productive, even if you haven't taken a single concrete step. The Stoics cautioned against this. Virtue lies in action, not in appearance. When you become accustomed to receiving praise for what you plan to do, you risk losing the urgency and energy needed to transform those plans into reality. The danger is that this premature gratification can be so pleasant that you relax, become complacent, and without realizing it, cease to advance. The human brain seeks pleasure and avoids effort. When you recount your projects and receive approval, your mind feels satisfied, as if you've already completed part of the objective. However, that satisfaction is hollow, because there is no result, only words. Stoicism teaches that authentic progress is silent, that true advancement requires no applause or witnesses. If you make a habit of speaking before acting, your motivation weakens because the reward has already been dispensed in the form of social recognition. Therefore, the wise Stoics preferred to work in private, celebrate their achievements in silence, and allow their results to speak for themselves. The trap of instant gratification is particularly perilous in an age where everything is shared and displayed. Social media, everyday conversations, even friend groups encourage announcing every goal, every small step, as if the process of transformation needs validation from the world. But the Stoic knows that the strongest motivation originates from within, that which does not depend on external approval. Speaking less and doing more becomes a daily discipline, a way to protect energy and maintain focus on what truly matters. Consistent, silent action. True growth strengthens in intimacy, away from the noise and the pressure to meet external expectations. When you work for yourself without seeking approval, every step you take is more solid, more authentic. Stoicism insists that real satisfaction comes not from applause but from the coherence between what you think, what you say, and what you do. Celebrate every victory privately, no matter how small, and remain silent until the achievement is so evident that it needs no explanation. In this way, your motivation stays alive, your commitment deepens, and your energy is directed where it's truly needed, towards action. Ultimately, the allure of instant gratification is precisely that, an illusion that distracts you from your genuine objectives. If you desire different results, you need a different approach. Stop talking so much about what you're going to do and start doing it. Make silence your ally and action your language. When your accomplishments are real, when your life speaks for you, you will discover that the most powerful validation comes from your own effort, not from the approval of others. Stoicism reminds you that true success is quiet, that greatness does not need to be announced, and that the deepest satisfaction comes from moving forward, even if no one sees it. The art of attentive listening. In a world where everyone seems to vie for the loudest voice, true power lies with those who know when to be silent and truly pay attention. The Stoics understood that listening isn't merely waiting for another to finish speaking so you can interject, but rather being fully present, with an open mind and heart, ready to grasp what the other person genuinely feels and needs. Being a great listener is far more than a social skill. It's a declaration of humility and a form of conscious presence. When you choose to listen, you shift focus from yourself, creating a space where the other person can reveal themselves authentically without fear of judgment or interruption. Attentive listening transforms relationships. The person who feels heard lowers their guard, trusts more deeply, and dares to share what truly matters to them. In this silent exchange, bridges of trust and respect are built that cannot be achieved with brilliant speeches or empty words. The Stoic knows that often the greatest gift they can offer is their attentive silence, their sincere gaze, their willingness to simply be there without the urge to correct, advise, or impress. This magnetic attitude not only strengthens bonds with others, but also elevates one's self-esteem, because a good listener feels useful and valuable without needing to be the center of attention. The art of listening is also a powerful tool for self-governance. While the ego seeks to shine and prove itself, Stoic wisdom encourages restraint, observing before reacting, allowing the other person to complete their process before intervening. This habit cultivates patience, empathy, and the ability to view the world from different perspectives. When you practice active listening, you realize that often the answers you seek are embedded in the other person's words, in their silences, in their gestures. You learn to read between the lines and understand that communication isn't just about what is said, but everything that is felt and left unexpressed. Stoicism teaches that listening more and speaking less is a way to conserve energy and avoid unnecessary conflicts. Many arguments arise because no one wants to yield the floor, because everyone seeks to be right. But when you choose to listen, you disarm the other person, creating an atmosphere of respect where differences can be explored without aggression or imposition. A good listener doesn't need to win debates, because their objective isn't to dominate, but to learn and connect. This attitude fosters admiration and trust, often transforming a stranger into an ally, an adversary into a friend. Finally, listening with intention is an act of generosity and a display of self-control. It's not about being silent out of submission, but about choosing when to speak and when to remain quiet. The Stoic knows that ultimately, the words that have the most impact are not those that are uttered carelessly, but those reserved for the opportune moment. Listening is a way to honor others and to honor oneself, because in that shared silence, the true essence of human connection is revealed, the desire to be understood, accepted, and valued. If you choose to practice the art of listening, you will discover that your presence becomes magnetic, your relationships deepen, and your life becomes far richer in meaning. You've come this far because deep down, you know you don't want to be a bystander in your own life, nor do you wish to keep replaying the same stories that bind you to the past. Stoicism is not just an ancient philosophy, it's an urgent call to awaken and take control of your discourse, your emotions, and your destiny. Every word you utter, every silence you choose, every time you decide not to expose your fears or seek external validation, you're constructing a stronger, freer version of yourself. This isn't about pretending everything is fine or ignoring what hurts. It's about ceasing to feed what limits you and starting to speak, think, and act solely to advance. Today, you hold the power to reclaim your narrative, to stop being a slave to your words, and to become the architect of a more fulfilling and conscious life. Internal discipline, strategic silence, the art of listening, and the humility to let your results speak for themselves are real, practical, and transformative tools. You don't need to trumpet your achievements or justify your processes. Make silence your sanctuary, action your language, and consistency your banner. Greatness doesn't need to be announced. It becomes evident when your presence inspires respect, and your actions speak louder than any discourse. Don't settle into a narrative of pain, or be content with the empty reward of merely talking about what you'll do. Each day, choose words that propel you, that build you up, that draw you closer to the life you truly deserve. If you've reached the end, it's because you're ready to stop being a prisoner of your story and start living from intention, temperance, and authenticity. Don't let external noise drown out your inner voice. Take ownership of your narrative and become the epitome of self-control and wisdom that the Stoics would admire. Now, if this message resonated with you, if you feel it's time to change your discourse and your life, I invite you to make your mark. Comment below, "From today I speak only to advance. I am Stoic." Subscribe to the channel, like, and share this video so more people can transform their reality through the power of their words. Remember, every day is a new opportunity to write a different chapter. Make it yours. Do it now.